Welcome, curious minds, back to the deep dive. We often look at businesses and immediately think, okay, financial statements, the numbers, the bottom line.
Right, the balance sheets, income statement.
Exactly. But really getting a company, truly understanding its pulse, it goes way beyond just those raw numbers.
Hmm.
It's about grasping the whole environment it operates in, the kind of risks it's actually willing to take, and how it defines its very purpose.
Yeah.
It's like this strategic dance, isn't it, between the big vision and, well, market realities.
Absolutely. It's acknowledging that uncertainty isn't just, a problem to solve. It's a constant, you navigate.
Yeah.
And the real skill is making those smart strategic choices so the organization isn't just like treading water, but actually moving forward, hitting its goals.
Uh,
Without that deeper strategic view, those financials, well, they don't tell the full story. Not really.
and that's exactly why today we're continuing our deep dive into enterprise risk management, or ER. And you should think of ERM less like some corporate checklist and more like a framework, maybe a compass, something that helps any organization manage those uncertainties and ultimately hit its strategic targets.
And it's not about getting rid of all risks because, let's face it, that's impossible.
Right?
It's about making smart calls on which risks to take and, how best to handle them.
So this is actually part two of our wider look at ERM. Last time we really dug into the foundations, governance and culture, kind of set the stage for how values and leadership shape that risk approach.
Yeah, that groundwork was crucial. And today, we're shifting focus squarely onto strategy and objective setting. This is just, well, it's vital. It ensures risk management isn't stuck in some back office silo.
Right.
It needs to be woven right into the core mission, the long-term vision of the whole organization.
Okay, but before we get into the weeds on that, just a quick reminder for everyone listening. This deep dive is based on material from Farhat lectures.
That's right.
All the content, the examples, the explanations we're talking about today, it's all derived from the fantastic accounting resources over at farhatlectures.com. So whether you're an accounting student, maybe studying for the CPA exam, or you're already a professional, definitely check out the website. They've got loads of extra practice questions, video lectures, really detailed support to help reinforce what we're covering today.
And a big thanks to Professor Farhat for providing this valuable material for us to discuss.
Absolutely. So our mission for you today, by the end of this, you'll have a really clear grasp of the 4 key principles for setting strategy and objectives within ERM.
But maybe more importantly, we want to connect those dots for you, show you how these principles aren't standalone things, but how they all work together to build a more resilient, forward-thinking company.
Okay, so if the big picture is where we start, that first key step in ERM, it often gets overlooked, but it's absolutely foundational. Analyzing the business context. Sounds a bit dry, maybe, but it's really just asking, what's actually going on around us? What events, trends, relationships, what's influencing our strategy? Why is understanding this environment the absolute starting point?
Because your strategy doesn't just appear out of thin air, right? It's totally shaped by the landscape you're in.
Okay.
Understanding that context tells you what's even possible, what risks you're facing just by being there, and critically, how you should even think about setting goals. We can kind of split these influences into 2 main buckets. Internal factors, what's inside the house, and external factors outside the house.
All right, let's peek inside the house first. What internal things really move the needle on strategy?
Well, first up, your capital and resources. These aren't just lines on a spreadsheet, they're your strategic fuel.
Right, your assets, cash.
Exactly. A company with plenty of cash isn't just rich, it has options. It can pursue aggressive growth, maybe weather a downturn better, even snap up competitors. But if capital's tight, then maybe you're forced to focus purely on efficiency, cost cutting. That fundamentally shapes your choices, your risk appetite. It sets the boundaries of what you can realistically do.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I've seen companies with, brilliant ideas on paper, but their internal culture just wasn't having it, almost like antibodies fighting off a good idea. How critical are the people beyond just, skills on a resume?
Oh, it's massive. That collective knowledge, the specific skills, yeah, but maybe even more critical is the internal culture.
Okay.
If your team is rigid, resistant to change, maybe doesn't have that innovative spark, well, you can't just declare yourself an innovative company in the strategy document. It won't happen.
Yeah.
But if your people are open-minded, visionary, then your strategy absolutely has to leverage that. Your people aren't just resources, they're your strategic engine, really.
So it's not just having talent, but having the culture that lets them run with the strategy. That's a key difference.
Absolutely. A crucial distinction.
And beyond people and money, we've also got internal processes and technology, yeah.
Definitely. Your internal workflows, how you handle change, those are your processes. They need to be agile. They need to support where you're trying to go. Clunky processes will just strangle a good strategy.
Uh-huh.
And then technology. Is it cutting edge? Is it ancient? Is it just, okay, your tech stack can either open up bold new strategic doors or seriously hold you back. It's the toolkit you have to work with.
Okay, so that's the internal view. Now let's step outside the building.
Yeah.
What external forces are constantly pushing and pulling?
Well, political factors are always in play. Just think about how tax policies can swing wildly between different governments.
Oh, yeah.
You know, corporate tax cuts under one administration versus, say, more regulations under another. That can massively influence whether a company invests here or maybe looks overseas. You got to keep an eye on that constantly changing political landscape.
And economic factors.
Yep.
Well, they're always front-page news, aren't they?
Yeah.
And they hit businesses directly.
They really do. Interest rates, inflation, even just how easy it is to get credit. These things dramatically shape your options.
For sure.
Like when interest rates are super low, businesses are much more likely to borrow money, expand, maybe take on more debt to fuel that growth. Your strategy has to sync up with that economic reality. Otherwise, you're fighting the current.
And then there's social factors. These feel like they're changing faster than ever. Consumer tastes, demographics.
Totally. Customer preferences are huge. If your target audience lives on TikTok or they're really prioritizing sustainable products, your whole marketing, your product development, it all needs to reflect that.
Right.
And demographics matter hugely. Your strategy for a city full of young professionals will look completely different from one targeting retirees down in Florida, you know? You have to know who you're serving and what they care about.
And technological changes. These aren't just small tweaks anymore. Sometimes they're like earthquakes shaking up whole industries.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Things like generative AI, the explosion in big data, the sheer speed of R&D, these can fundamentally change everything overnight.
Yeah.
Companies that don't adapt their strategies or maybe even totally rethink their business model, they risk becoming obsolete really, really fast. It's a constant adaptation game.
So beyond the economy and tech, what about the rules of the game? The legal side?
Yeah, laws, regulations, industry-specific rules, those are like the essential guardrails, especially in heavily regulated areas like pharma, banking, energy. Compliance isn't just a nice to have, it's your license to operate. Ignoring them, that's risking the entire business.
Then finally, environmental factors. These have become impossible to ignore, haven't they?
Definitely. Climate change, shifting consumer attitudes towards sustainability, more frequent natural disasters. These are critical. They impact everything from your supply chains and how resilient your operations are to your brand image and public perception. Companies are now actively building environmental risk into their long-term thinking.
Okay, so after you've done all this digging, internal, external column, you start to get a feel for the kind of context you're operating in. I know there are a few ways to categorize these contexts.
That's right. Your context might be dynamic. Think low barriers for new competitors to jump in, new risks popping up really fast.
Like ride sharing, maybe?
Yeah, that's a decent example. New players, new regulations seem to appear constantly, forcing quick strategic shifts.
Or it could be complex.
Right. That's where you see lots of interconnected parts, maybe spanning different countries or totally different business lines. Think of a giant conglomerate like PepsiCo global operations, drinks, snacks, lots of moving pieces. A problem in one area can easily ripple through others.
Okay. And then the really tricky one, unpredictable. That sounds tough.
It really can be. That's where changes happen super fast, often without warning, and products can become obsolete almost instantly. Tech companies often live here. A competitor drops a groundbreaking new product, and suddenly your main offering looks old news. You're forced into a major strategic rethink, like now, constant adaptation is the name of the game.
All right, so now we understand the ground beneath our feet, so to speak. The next big question is, how much risk are we actually willing to take? This brings us to principle 2, defining risk appetite. This feels like where a company's real strategic personality comes out.
It really does. But maybe before we jump into appetite, let's quickly define risk itself in this ERM world.
Good point. So what is risk?
Well, fundamentally, risk is just the possibility that some event happens and negatively impacts your strategy or objective. It's the potential bump in the road.
Yep.
So for a restaurant, maybe it's a food safety issue. For an airline, a major safety incident. For that coastal developer, a hurricane. Each business faces unique threats that could derail its plans.
So risk appetite is about deciding how big a bump you're willing to hit while chasing those goals.
Exactly. It's the amount of risk an organization says, okay, we're willing to accept this much in order to achieve what it wants to achieve. And like you said, companies vary wildly here. Some are super cautious, risk averse. Others embrace significant risk, hoping for bigger rewards. It really reflects their strategic stance.
And it's not just a gut feeling, right? You
Yeah.
have to fit within the company's reality.
Yeah, absolutely not just a gut feeling. Risk appetite has to be looked at alongside the company's mission, its vision, its culture, its past strategies. And here's the really critical bit.
Mhm.
It must always be less than the organization's risk capacity,
Risk capacity,
meaning the absolute maximum amount of risk the company could possibly handle before it, well, breaks, before it faces serious financial distress or failure. Your appetite, what you're willing to take, has to be lower than what you can take. Otherwise, you're playing with fire.
Okay, that makes sense. So how do companies actually measure this? Is it just low, medium, high, or more concrete?
It can be both. Qualitatively, yeah, you might hear terms like low, medium, high tolerance, but quantitatively, it gets sharper. A retailer might say, we'll accept bad debt up to, say, 10% of sales.
Okay.
A bank might set a limit, like no more than 3% of our loans can be non-performing. In finance, you get even more specific with things like standard deviation or beta to measure acceptable volatility.
Got it. So once you know your appetite, you need to know what risks are actually on the menu. That brings in some key terms like risk inventory.
Right. Risk inventory is basically the big exercise of identifying all the potential risks that could possibly affect your business and its strategies.
So listing everything out.
Yeah, but it's more than just a list of the obvious stuff. It's about proactively hunting for those less obvious threats, maybe even those black swan events people talk about.
Like the pandemic.
Exactly. How many companies realistically had global pandemic shuts down supply chains high on their risk inventory before 2020, even though we'd seen things like SARS before? That deep thinking is vital.
Yeah, good point. Then there's inherent risk. What's that?
Inherent risk is the raw risk. It's the risk level before you take any steps to manage it, before you put in controls, before insurance, before anything. It's the starting point, the natural vulnerability.
Like the before picture. Which logically leads to residual risk. The after picture.
Precisely. Residual risk is what's left over after management has acted, put in controls, changed processes, bought insurance, whatever, to reduce that inherent risk.
Right.
The goal is always to shrink that inherent risk down to a level of residual risk that fits within your defined risk appetite. Now, getting to zero residual risk, almost impossible, and probably not even smart, because it might mean taking no risks at all.
Which means no progress.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
you aim to get it down to an acceptable level.
And who gives the final okay on this risk appetite level? Where does the buck stop?
That ultimately rests with the board of directors. They approve the risk appetite, but just as important, they need to make sure it's communicated clearly all the way down through the organization.
Why is that communication so key?
To prevent what sometimes happens, you get rogue managers, maybe in a division or department, taking on way more risk than the company agreed to, chasing their own targets perhaps. That top-down clarity is essential to keep everyone aligned with the overall strategy and risk profile.
Okay, makes perfect sense. So we've got our context. We know our risk tolerance. Principle 3 is evaluating alternative strategies. This implies the first idea isn't always the best one.
That's exactly it. Your initial strategy might seem great, but maybe it's not the most resilient given the context. Or maybe there's a better way to create value. Things change fast externally, too.
So you need options.
You absolutely need to explore different paths. But, and this is a big but, even these alternative strategies have to align with your risk profile, your mission, your vision, your core values. You don't throw your identity out the window just because you found a potentially lucrative alternative.
Right, it still has to be you. How do companies systematically check out these alternatives? Are there common tools?
Definitely. Scenario analysis is a really powerful one. You basically play out different what-if situations.
Like?
What if sales suddenly double? Or what if they crater? What if a recession hits? Or the economy booms? How would strategy A versus strategy B perform under those different conditions? It forces you to stress test your ideas against different futures.
And the classic SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Still relevant.
Oh, absolutely. It's a classic for a reason. It forces you to systematically look at how can we use our strengths? How do we fix our weaknesses? How do we jump on these opportunities? And how do we defend against these threats?
Right.
Mapping that all out can naturally generate alternative strategies that might be a much better fit for the reality you're facing. It's about playing smart.
And looking at what the competition is doing. Competitor analysis, that helps too.
For sure. Watching your competitors, seeing what works for them, where they stumble, maybe where they've missed something, gives you valuable intel.
Learning from their mistakes, maybe?
Or their successes. It can spark ideas for your own alternatives, helping you maybe leapfrog them or at least avoid the pitfalls they fell into.
Okay, so regardless of the strategy chosen, the ultimate goal is always about value, right? What does value really mean here? It sounds simple, but
It's the absolute bottom line, the litmus test. A strategy should never be adopted if it doesn't somehow create, realize, or preserve value. Let's unpack that.
okay.
You create value when the benefits clearly outweigh the costs. Think a project with a positive net present value or simply generating more revenue than expenses over time. It's about making the pie bigger.
And realize value, making it real.
Exactly. That's turning those created benefits into tangible results, usually cash or cash equivalents. Paying dividends to shareholders, building up retained earnings on the balance sheet, that's realizing the value you've created, making it concrete.
And preserve value, keeping what you've got.
You got it. This is about maintaining the company's resources and assets, protecting its long-term health. Things like proactive maintenance on equipment, investing in R&D to stay relevant, building intangible assets like brand reputation or patents. It's about protecting the golden goose.
And the opposite is value erosion.
The nightmare scenario, yeah. When costs exceed benefits, when you're losing resources, losing competitive ground, that's what ERM helps you avoid.
Wow, okay. So context analyzed, risk appetite defined, alternatives weighed. Now the fourth principle, formulating business objectives. This feels like where strategy gets translated into actual marching orders.
It absolutely is. This is where that alignment we keep talking about becomes super critical. Every single business objective must line up perfectly with the risk appetite, the core values, the mission, the vision. It's all got to point in the same direction. This alignment is just drilled into you in ERM frameworks.
And typically there are four main kinds of objectives we see.
That's right. First, the strategic objectives. These are the big, high-level goals setting the overall direction. Like, we will enter one new international market every 2 years. It's the North Star.
Then operational objectives, more day-to-day.
Exactly. These focus on using resources efficiently to make the strategic objectives happen. An example might be reduce employee turnover from 20% to 10% within 18 months.
And how would you achieve that?
Maybe through better training, improved compensation, more flexible work arrangements, things that make the operational engine run smoother and support the bigger strategy.
Okay. Third type, reporting objectives. Sounds like it's all about the numbers and transparency.
Spot on. This is about ensuring your reporting, financial, operational, internal, external, is reliable, accurate, and objective. It means having a strong accounting function, good internal controls to catch errors or fraud.
And maybe external auditors.
Often, yes. External auditors provide that independent check, building trust with investors and other stakeholders. It's about the integrity of your information.
And finally, compliance objectives.
This is all about playing by the rules, adhering to laws, regulations, industry standards, and even your own internal company policies.
How do you ensure that?
Usually through training, clear communication of what's expected, and having consequences for non-compliance. It's about maintaining your license to operate legally and ethically.
Right. And for any of these objectives to actually work, they need to be well-defined. I think there's an acronym for that. SOO.
That's the one. Good objectives should be specific, clear, not vague. Enter a new market is specific.
Okay.
Measurable. You need to quantify it. Is it $1 million market? Are we reducing turnover to 10%? Needs a number.
Makes sense.
Observable. Can you actually see it happening? Can you track progress?
Right.
And obtainable. This one's huge. Is it realistic? Can we actually achieve this with our resources and context? Setting impossible goals just demoralizes everyone. Better to set a tough but achievable target.
So it's this whole connected process. Analyze the world around you, decide how much risk you'll take, weigh your strategic options, and then set clear, achievable targets that align with everything else. It really is an ecosystem.
It absolutely is. So yeah, this deep dive really unpacked that strategy and objective setting piece of ERM. We saw how analyzing context, defining risk appetite, evaluating alternatives, and formulating objectives all link together. They aren't just separate steps. They influence each other constantly to shape the company's path.
That was incredibly clear, thank you. And for those following along, this was part 2, building on part 1's look at governance and culture. We know ERM has 5 main components. So what's next?
Well, the next logical step in the framework is performance. And I'll tell you now, that's going to be a big discussion. It's all about how organizations actually manage risk day to day, how they assess if their strategies are working, how performance ties back to objectives. It's where the rubber really meets the road.
Looking forward to that one. So as we wrap up today, here's something for you, the listener, to think about. Considering everything we discussed, the internal factors, external pressures, risk appetite, strategic choices, how might understanding these concepts for your own organization, or even just in general, shape your professional goals? Or maybe even how you approach planning in your personal life?
Yeah, that's a great takeaway question. These principles aren't just for the C-suite. They have relevance everywhere.
Thank you for joining us again on the Deep Dive.
We look forward to exploring performance with you next time.
Until then, keep digging deeper.